101 years ago, Marjorie Williams Bianco's book, The Velveteen Rabbit, was published. It's a story about an old-fashioned stuffed rabbit who feels less than the newfangled mechanical toys that mimic real things. This is intentional. In one of the often quoted passages, the rabbit asks the wise old horse toy what it actually means to be real. Real isn't how you're made, said the skin horse. This is a passage from the book. It's a thing that happens to you when a child loves you for a long, long time. Not just to play with, but really loves you. Then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. And then the horse says more. He says, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. We often talk together in this space about the idea of becoming who we're meant to be, becoming our authentic and full selves. We talk about how that is the work of a whole lifetime, supported hopefully from our first breath to our last by those who love us, who want to see us flourish, who understand that we are beautiful, unique, and full of possibility. Today, together, we will do the work of honoring the becoming of a little one born among us. They're not here yet, but they're on their way. And we will do the work of honoring the becoming of all of us, individually and collectively, as we consider our source text for this morning, which is the Barbie movie. Thank you for bringing your whole beautiful becoming self to this time that we will share. We have one reading this morning. It is a poem titled Barbie Manifesto by Allison Luderman. I'm going to see the Barbie movie tonight because I had a feminist mother who didn't buy us Barbies. And when I said I wanted to be a nurse, she said, why don't you be a doctor? But I really did want to be a nurse because of the perky hats they got to wear, bobby pin to their sleek, shiny hair, and I'm going to wear pink to the Barbie movie, hot pink, the color of cheap candy, like the chalky sugar cigarettes we pretended to smoke with their fake red tips. And I'm going to squeal like a cheerleader on ecstasy. I'm going to be silly and girly and super excited and all the things you were never supposed to be, because doing anything like a girl, running or throwing or thinking or writing or talking, is the worst insult. An icky, sticky, oozing, bleeding, shrill, smelly girly girl. It means you're not smart or cool. You cry when they throw footballs at your chest, which my boyfriend did in high school because he wanted to help me toughen up. It means you'll be laughed at and dismissed. So I've acted serious and intelligent and tough for about 1,000 years just to prove them all wrong. But now I'm begging to be dismissed. Please dismiss me so I can lounge by the pool in a bright pink bikini while some Ken brings me drinks with little umbrellas, because I'm tired of proving my point. I don't remember what my point is anyway, or the point of this whole thing in the first place. Men, women, who cares? I just want to hide under the bed with my best friend and a flashlight, constructing secret worlds we can live in forever. I want to grow old on Planet Girl, painting each of my stubby fingernails a different color of neon. I have pretended I sprang fully grown from the forehead of my father, bristling with armor. I have worn olive, drab, and camouflaged the delight I once took in smearing myself with Vaseline and admiring my new little breast buds in the midnight mirror. I have done all the right things. I have feigned interest in what bored me. I have feigned politeness. I have pretended that my inner organs are not all glistening pink. My heart and my liver and my lungs, pink as your tongue or the pads of your feet or your palms. I was well into my 20s before I wore makeup of really any kind for any reason. And to this day, as you know by now, I barely do, really only for special occasions. For the longest time, I refused to wear dresses. I think I only actually sort of started of my own volition in my 30s, except if I was like going out to a fancy dinner with family. No one taught me how to handle my curly hair until literally like 5 years ago, only how to treat it badly in an attempt to tame it into submission, right? To this day, again, as you may have noticed, I barely wear any jewelry. The reading this morning, although I love it, doesn't actually echo my own feelings. As a child, I was what was then called a tomboy. I wanted to play sports with my older brother. Many of my best friends were boys, and I embraced essentially nothing femme. Femme still isn't a category I would claim for myself today, in part, partially because I just don't love categories, but also for a more complex reason. Not unlike the author of our reading, overt, more traditional femininity was not part of my upbringing. Not, for me, it wasn't in dress or adornment or even in behavior. And I think this is because I grew up in a moment when, or a household where, feminism had not yet turned to embrace the feminine, but was still embracing more traditionally masculine qualities and habits as the sort of apex of the achievement of equality, right? So if a woman could work in traditional male roles or dress in traditionally male clothes and abandon the socially expected or enforced trappings of womanhood like makeup and jewelry and hairlessness, then that would mean we had made it, right? So even now, I have pretty complicated feelings about our reading and its insistence on girly things. It didn't own anything pink to wear. The relationship of feminism to choice and empowerment in the ways we want has never been easy. My mother, who's now in her 70s, got flack for staying home with her children. Feminism among some of her peers meant that women should go to work, otherwise, what was it all for? Plenty of folks my generation who have embraced the traditionally feminine in ways that worked for them have been critiqued for appearing to trade on sex appeal or for setting the movement back. But feminism, as I've always understood it, is not meant to take some monolith of women and turn them into the monolith of men, but rather to open the door for all people of all genders to embrace what works for them and become themselves. How many people actually saw Barbie? Let's just start there for a second. Okay, quite a few. So I was excited to see Barbie, though I have never had any Barbies of my own. They were not allowed in my house. But one of my best friends growing up, Olivia, had Barbies, and her parents were actors, so they had lots of makeup. This was what I understood as a child, at least. When we would have sleepovers, and I swear I haven't thought about this in probably 2 decades, but when we would have sleepovers, we would huddle on her bed, which was the bottom of a bunk bed that she shared with her sister. There was a sheet hanging along the side so no one could see what we were doing. And we would make each other up in her mother's makeup, like with these garish, like truly that only like 4th grade girls who don't know what they're doing can achieve, like that kind of look. And we would play with the Barbies and play at romance and intrigue and all the things that my American Girl dolls, which I loved, like couldn't do, right? They just couldn't participate in that kind of play. I was excited to see Barbie, not because I loved the toy growing up, but partially because I kept hearing from folks how much they loved the movie. And I had been reminded that the director and writer, Greta Gerwig, was raised Unitarian Universalist. I was excited because what I had been told led me to believe the movie was like a feminist movie, like a smash the patriarchy kind of movie, part of the Billion Girl Summer, as it's being called. Have you heard this term? Okay, so this term is being used because Barbie has grossed over $1 billion in the theater, the first movie ever directed by a woman to make anything approaching that amount of money. And also, both Beyonce and Taylor Swift are slated to make $1 billion plus on their tours this summer. So it's Billion Girl Summer, okay? All this female empowerment has gotten some men real riled up out there, like actually angry. Right? I don't know if you've seen this online. For your own sake, I hope you're not having to see it online, but it's as if the success of these women and this film takes something away from the men who are angry, as if only they have a right to careers this standout, fulfilling, lucrative, and culturally shifting. So I was excited, and I'm glad that we saw the movie. And I almost don't want to tell you, but I was not actually as enamored as other folks have been, if I'm being really honest. It raised super important questions. It lifted up some poignant truths. I cried a handful of times. It was kitschy and it was fun, and I could totally see the UU and Greta Gerwig in this movie. And for me, it read in a complicated way as a feminist manifesto. So it didn't read to me as like an anti-patriarchy manifesto so much as a reframing of what feminism can and should be, or should be founded on. It almost seemed to me to indicate that the question of like smashing the patriarchy is not actually the right question. Or better stated, that there is something that comes before that we have to get right before anything else can shift. I'm going to explain all that, I promise. But before I do, I want to say here that I really did agonize about how to do this service without giving spoilers, and in the end, I am giving spoilers. I don't think we can have the conversation that I really want us to have about Barbie without me doing so. I promise you that the spoilers don't make the movie less worthwhile, as in, if you haven't seen it, it will still be worth your while to see it after hearing this sermon. The power in the film is not in the suspense or the wondering or the unexpected plot twists. That's not the point. That said, this is your one out. If you don't want spoilers, go to Fellowship Hall and wait for coffee hour, okay? Last chance. I will also say that a lot of ink has been spilled analyzing this movie. I've intentionally not read a lot of it, okay? So I'm putting that out there because I wanted to form my own thoughts about it. And it would be wildly egotistical of me to stand up here and be like, I had this hot take that no one else has ever had. Certainly someone has said what I'm going to say. If you've read that piece, send it to me. I'd love to read it. If you've read something contradictory, send it to me. I'd love to read it, okay? All right, that was it. That was your chance. Now it's over, okay. The arc of the movie is pretty basic. So stereotypical Barbie, so the Barbie you think of, like if you close your eyes and you picture Barbie, that's stereotypical Barbie, lives in Barbie land, where all positions of power are held by women, and the Kens are adornments, whose value is based on whether or not the Barbies pay attention to them. Everything is pink and plastic and pretty, and also now somewhat diverse. The Barbie universe has accepted some amount of diversity. There's like a couple token fat Barbies, there's a pregnant Barbie, there's a Barbie in a wheelchair, Barbies of various races, all based on real Barbie dolls. But stereotypical Barbie is, of course, blonde, blue-eyed, impossibly thin, tall. All of a sudden, she starts to experience weird symptoms. She's thinking about death. Her feet lose their perpetual high heel thing, and she goes like flat. And things for her in Barbie land are no longer perfect. She has a cold shower. And she goes to see Weird Barbie. Okay, so Weird Barbie is a Barbie who lives on a hill in a strange house and who no longer looks like the perfect Barbie doll. And what we learn from Weird Barbie is that the human world and Barbie land are linked by the way that humans play with their Barbies. So Weird Barbie is as she is because the human child who played with her hard. It's reminiscent of what the horse tells the Velveteen Rabbit. When you are really played with, your buttons fray, your hair thins out, and anyone who doesn't understand is going to think you're ugly or weird. So stereotypical Barbie, Weird Barbie tells her to do this. Stereotypical Barbie has to go into the human world and figure out why the human who is playing with her is messing up her perfect Barbie life. It's a life she wants back. She does not want change. She does not want this weirdness. She just wants to go back. Ken tags along. Mayhem ensues, of course. And the key points that happen next are that Ken learns in our world, the real world, about patriarchy and brings it back to Barbie land. And Barbie stays in the real world to finish her quest alone. And Barbie in the real world encounters what it means to be a human and not a doll. The basic frame of the movie. Now, here's why I think the film at times diminishes its own stance on feminism if what we're doing is talking specifically about patriarchy. Yes, it strives for diversity. Yes, where Oppenheimer was starkly white and male, Barbie has room for many more women doing many more interesting things. But ultimately, interestingly, to me, it felt like the Ken arc undercut the feminism of the movie. Stereotypical Barbie is a somewhat two-dimensional, flat depiction of womanhood. She's literally called a stereotype. This is intentional. But then there's Ken getting this real emotional arc of feeling unseen by Barbie and getting angry and vindictive about it and instituting a system of patriarchy back in Barbie land, where he and the other Kens brainwash the Barbies into thinking a position of servitude feels good and joyful and happy. The Ken storyline can be read, I think, as a reflection of the modern sort of pro-male, anti-woman, incel, men's rights activist movement. Men who believe they have a right to women's bodies, to women's choices, to the power and the money and the positions. And on the one hand, the film mocks these movements, to be sure. It's all about like horses. It's very funny, actually. But it also gives them a lot of airtime, actually. Ken and his whole journey gets a lot of airtime. And quite a bit of sympathy is elicited for Ken's underlying emotional angst. There is compassion in the film for Ken's displacement and marginalization, and that's tricky. Because on the one hand, in Barbie land, the men occupy the position women in our world occupy, and so sympathy makes sense. But on the other hand, the sympathy undercuts the critique of these outrageous men's rights movements, right? Eventually, stereotypical Barbie gets back to Barbie land and she teams up with Weird Barbie and a handful of others, and they deprogram the Barbies and they save Barbie land and everything is great. And then they reinstitute a system that continues to marginalize the Kens. They throw them like a couple of treats to pacify them, but largely it goes back to a matriarchy rather than to the equality that I think we hope feminism seeks. So there's a world reversed from our own, where women are in control and run everything, that gets turned on its head, made to look like our world, and then it's saved not by achieving balance, but by going back to being the opposite of our world. A world still out of balance, without equal opportunity and value for all people. The upside of the saving is that Barbie does encourage Ken to stop defining himself by her and to figure out who he is. But that's still within a world in which he has no power, no real possibility in many ways. Now, on the one hand, maybe this is designed as a tongue-in-cheek comment on the perpetuity of the patriarchy, but the danger is that the film actually declares that the maintenance of the status quo of inequality and marginalization is okay, inevitable, whether it's in Barbie land or in our world. And so that piece of it hardly feels to me like a feminist statement, not if we understand feminism as the quest for equality, opportunity, and justice, regardless of gender. It's also the case that throughout the film, nothing changes in the real world, our world. When Barbie first arrives there, she thinks all the girls and women will love her for having fixed the oppression of women, right? And what she finds is a world of diverse women, some who love her, some who despise her for having created a wild expectation of womanhood, especially physically. What she finds in our world is not a perfect reflection of hers, or a perfect opposite of hers, or not a perfect reflection of hers where women run the world and have endless opportunity, but the opposite, one where women are still held to ridiculous expectations. It's a world in which women are still told to be career-oriented but not overly ambitious, to be independent but not make men feel obsolete, to be thin but never say you want to be thin and don't be too thin, to want money but not too much money, definitely don't make $1 billion. There's a whole monologue delivered by America Ferrera's character on just how impossible it is to be a woman in our world. Now that monologue, I think, spoke like truths to a lot of women, right? It certainly rang true in my own experience. We are often called aggressive when we have strong opinions rather than assertive, rude when we stand up for ourselves rather than bold, selfish when we prioritize ourselves rather than sensibly putting ourselves first. There are many moments like this in the film that really speak to the truth of what it is to live in our overly gendered, overly patriarchal, overly oppressive world, and those moments truly do shine. But what is more fascinating to me than anything, honestly, is that in the end, Barbie wants to become real, like the Velveteen Rabbit, like Pinocchio, even though she sees what our world is, even though she sees sorrow and grief, It's a bit like when the Buddha leaves his childhood palace and encounters the real world. Barbie walks out of Barbie Land and can't ever go back. She's changed by what she now knows. And this is why I don't actually think the movie ultimately is about the patriarchy. I actually think it's a movie about the feminism of becoming real through being seen and through engaging in relationship, becoming real by experiencing knowledge and grasping the complexities of being human. It also echoes the story of Genesis, right? Adam and Eve gain knowledge and they can never go back. But Barbie embraces that change, even though it's scary, even though it's overwhelming and new, and she becomes real. In the penultimate scene, Barbie is deciding if she really wants this new life. It's a little complicated, but she tells the ghost of her inventor, whose name is Ruth Handler, that she wants to be part of the people making the meaning. Can you get more you? Like, truly, were any of you like, oh my God, it's Unitarian Universalism on the screen? She doesn't want to be the thing being made. She wants to be part of the people making the meaning. She wants to be the one imagining, not being imagined. She wants to live a human life as messy as it is in all of its complexities. And Ruth Handler reminds Barbie that, quote, humans have only one ending, and that life is uncomfortable, so uncomfortable, and this is a quote too, that humans make up things like patriarchy and Barbie just to deal with how uncomfortable it is. And still, Barbie chooses this world, our humanity to share in. Because even with all its flaws and its problems, it's where she can be real. Not a two-dimensional stereotypical Barbie, but a real three-dimensional full being. That even with the limitations placed on women, here she can experience emotions, have relationships that she chooses, deepen her own identity, not be beholden to whoever plays with her. Here she can be perfectly imperfect, stumbling and discovering and becoming, and one day she can become old, beautiful in her age and her wisdom and her realness. And all of that sure as heck feels like a you story to me, and not one that tries to solve the patriarchy or declare what the next step of feminism should be, rather one that declares what the first step of feminism is, what being human is. Not systematic, not linear. It embraces agency. The idea that our becoming is not up to others, though certainly they can impede or facilitate it, just as we acknowledge in a baby dedication. The film, though it focuses only on the stereotypically beautiful, tries to underline the idea that each of us, every Ken, every Barbie, every Alan, everyone of all genders and races and backgrounds has the potential to become, each in our own way. And it embraces the idea that once created, a creation has a life of its own. There's a theology here, as well as a commentary on the issues we spoke about last week, about whether or not we're responsible for what we invent or create. Ruth Handler declares she could no more control Barbie than she could her own daughter. We can't decide for another what their path will be, but we can be there to support and encourage and celebrate their wholeness, their realness. The horse tells the Velveteen Rabbit that it is through being loved, seen, played with, that he will become real. Barbie teaches us that it's through facing the truth of our humanity, accepting its challenge and its beauty, entering into friendships and relationships with vulnerability and honesty, that we become our most real selves. When we have that, when we have community, family, friends, love, when we give and receive, when we see and are seen, know and are known, then our beauty and our uniqueness and our joy transcend any stereotype. Then we become, and we become more than we thought we could become. Look, we should always keep working for justice. We should absolutely smash the patriarchy and all forms of oppression and prejudice. We should labor tirelessly for an end to the marginalization of anyone. And maybe we begin all of that by being as real as we can. Remembering that every day we are learning and becoming, making mistakes and trying again, and that never ends until we breathe our last breath. And that every challenge and triumph along the way is a thing of beauty. We tell stories about toys that become real, not because we think it can actually happen, but because maybe we're not really any different. We begin our own lives as creations, dependent, incapable, completely reliant on those around us to teach us and mold us and guide us, and then we become. Slowly, surely, bit by bit, our possibility is recognized and realized. To me, the core of this film is that the fundamental work of feminism is to ensure that every single person, every being, every creature has the opportunity to realize their own possibility. Ensuring that will certainly require major political, social, cultural, and religious changes, but we won't be able to make those changes unless we start from the basic shared assumption that the freedom to become belongs to each and every person. May we be ever attentive to our own becoming. May we struggle always for the right of all to become. And may we help each other become real through our seeing, our knowing, and our loving. So may it be.